more laws, a rush to regulations, ever more complex. That's the wonderful thing about progress and instability. It creates anxiety, and anxiety creates regulation. It's great. And this is being driven by emotion, like most laws are. Get some headline, "You've got to do something!" A new law is passed, compliance is tightened, a regulatory framework is strengthened. Rarely do we see deregulation simplify things for very long before something else happens, and the environment is a jolly good example of that. Just think of environmental regulations. I have a number of my clients. They're some of the largest industrial companies in the world, and up to 80% of their turnover is driven by one word: compliance. By people like you who are advising them and their clients and their clients' clients that in order to comply, emission legislation is coming in, they need to do this, that, the other, they need these kinds of technologies, and away we go. Regulations, let's look at the size of this. I mean, this is climate litigation filings over time. Just look, from 1989 through to 2010, it's a whole new business. So there are all kinds of opportunities for us. But finally, here's a thought. I'm talking about corporate law now, and many of my friends who are corporate lawyers and they interface with commercial lawyers looking for advice have come to recognize that actually compliance is dead. That compliance is okay, but it only keeps you out of jail. It doesn't do anything for the brand. Let me give you an example. Up until fairly recently, about 15 years ago, in many EU countries, it was perfectly permissible for a multinational company to go and pay a bribe in order to build an HQ. So long as you didn't pay the bribe inside the EU, that is. If you paid the bribe to a Moscow mayor, for example, in order to get the permission to build your banking HQ, you could claim that as a tax-deductible expense, and the more you bribed under EU law, the more money you got back from an EU government. Now, it wasn't the case for all EU governments, but for quite a few. So you can imagine a Newsnight programme tomorrow night in which the chairman of one of the leading European banks is being quizzed by Jeremy Paxman, and he says, "So did you or did you not, in your junior capacity, see this email dated 1997? And he says, I've never disputed that I saw the email. But this email says it specifically authorized 2 payments of $10 million in order that you could build your HQ in Moscow. He said, well, I didn't sign the authorization. Yes, but you saw the email, did you not? Yes, I saw the email. But I would like to point out that whatever we did was 100% compliant at the time. Yes. What you mean is it was legal. So you wouldn't go to prison then, but you would go to prison now, correct? Say, well, yes. Which is why we have changed our directions to all of our staff, and we said that you can no longer do these kinds of things. Yes, but Patrick, pause for a moment here. I thought there was something to do with personal morality here. Isn't it about doing the right thing? Are you saying that it was right then or wrong then? Is it right or wrong now? Well, no, you shouldn't do that. But was it wrong then? You said it was legal, but it was wrong. Is that what you're telling me? Well, yes. So your fingerprints were all over something that was perfectly legal at the time, but was morally wicked. Is that what you're telling me? Do you have any morals, Patrick? Or are you just determined by the compliance department of your bank? Because if that is the case, heaven help us, and you no longer are fit for purpose. I think you should resign, don't you? You can see what a mess is in, can't you? He won't go to prison. You've protected him from that. But will he work again in banking? Will he ever work again anywhere? His reputation is trashed. He's been portrayed as an amoral monster by perfectly complying with every regulation that has come out in every 12-month period. So that is why I say, from the bottom of my heart, and I don't care who you're advising, that if you're looking to future, if you're looking to provide true insight rather than just information and advice, then the insight would be, look, my friend, I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to give you the advice that all the other compliance departments will give you across the world. And then I'm going to tell you why it's wrong. Because that advice will keep you out of prison if that is your object, but it will trash your brand, it will destroy your organization, and you could land up as an absolute pariah in the whole of the society in which you are currently respected as a hero. It's your choice, of course. But I wouldn't touch that contract with a barge pole. And the reason why I wouldn't touch it is because the future will not be driven by compliance, it will be driven by the most important word in the future, which is emotion. And emotions are a cruel thing. You'll be judged tomorrow by tomorrow's emotions, by the passions of the public in 2015 or even 2025. And you'll be judged ruthlessly, not by whether you complied, not by whether you were, quote, honest, but simply by whether you did what, by the future standards, was morally the right thing. So what we have to do is future emotion. We have to decide where we think public opinion may go in the light of some future scandal. And I think you agree with me, that the legislation is likely to progress in this particular direction. We need to be ahead of compliance. Compliance is the absolute baseline. And if we actually want to win trust for your company, while the other companies are kicking and screaming about being dragged into the third millennium regarding their whatever standards, I think we should say is, we think these regulations are rather good. In fact, we've been following them voluntarily for the last decade. In fact, we've been advising the government. In fact, we wrote the regulations. I don't know why they're whimpering and screaming about this kind of stuff. It's important to do what is morally right. And these regulations enshrine that in British law. And at the moment they do that, they've taken your advice and your insight, they've built their brand, they've created law instead of being driven by it, and they're in a very different place.